Our next speaker is someone well known to all of you, Marie Holland, who is Associate Librarian at McGill University's Rare Books and Special Collections. She supports teaching and research with responsibilities in the history of books and printing and in a range of French imprints, with a focus on the works of the French Enlightenment. She holds an MLIS degree from McGill School of Information Studies, my alma mater, and an MA in French Language and Literature from McGill as well. Prior to McGill, she gained valuable experience in the book trade with the reputable, and this is what she wrote, reputable antique bookseller Helen R. Kahn. So I agree with that. Helen is a very reputable book dealer. And Anne-Marie's talk is the Dictionnaire philosophique, the role of the production agents in shaping the content and the material forms of a work in progress.
Thank you, Chris. I'm happy to be in such distinguished company. So we'll be talking about the editions, particularly those held at McGill. And so you'll have this tangible evidence, which we're going to be digging out together. So we're going to look at a bunch of editions from the McGill Voltaire collection, our sample group. This group includes the splendid new acquisition of the J. Patrick Lee collection, offering a new critical mass of editions and copies with which to work. The Dictionnaire philosophique is one of the most significant titles in the McGill Voltaire collection and of great importance to the French Enlightenment, certainly, which is all reflected by the sheer number of editions in our stacks, amounting to more than 65 through to the 20th century. We have selected but a dozen of these to feature in this talk. The Dictionnaire philosophique was a work in progress. Voltaire worked on the manuscript numerous times from 1764 to 1769, which yielded many foreign editions and several clandestine productions in small province towns of France. The remarkable 18th century editions reveal singular cases regarding the creation process, the production, distribution, and circulation of Voltaire's publications. They record the connections between editions and reveal a fine trail of textual and iconographical precedent, while addressing a new pocket of readers. The case of the Dictionnaire philosophique reveals the consequence and rewards of a work in progress for the production agents. Our study encompasses the English translations, the philosophical dictionary for the pocket, which will follow fast on the heels of the French originals. American editions will be generated based upon one of the European precedents. Early American editions are a strength in the McGill Voltaire collection, and they are important because they suggest how Voltaire was introduced to America and provide further insights on the production agents and the general workings of the book trade in America. Finally, less is being done with the translated works of the Dictionnaire philosophique. The French lifetime printings has very good, what I call solid bibliographical control, and we have yet to make some progress with these English translations. We will focus on the genealogy of Voltaire's original text, fluctuating as it was, which begs this simple question in the circumstance of a work in progress: what is the role of the production agents in shaping the content and the material forms of the Dictionnaire philosophique? In fact, what are the outcomes? What does the product look like? So we rely upon three types of evidence: physical, textual, and paratextual, including frontispieces, which I'll just go over rather lightly, in order to document patterns between the editions. Here's a smattering of titles from the McGill Voltaire collection. We intend to deliver some kind of narrative about this production based on this evidence. McGill copies were verified with readings, of course, many. Voltaire scholarship is vast, and against the authoritative bibliographies, for instance, from the Voltaire Foundation's critical edition of the Complete Works of Voltaire, the Dictionnaire philosophique, 2-volume study directed by Christiane Mervaux, with the bibliography of the French 18th century editions, notably by Andrew Brown in 1994. So I'm showing you just one of the elements that gets passed down into the English language editions of the Philosophical Dictionary, this being a frontispiece from the Œuvre Complète, the Renoir edition from 1819. The reason why I show it, therefore, is due to this bust, which will find its way into American editions, just to keep it in mind. Houdon was the sculptor, and it's engraved by Augustin Saint-Aubin. So you pay attention to this, and I've noticed that this particular composition crops up in other works Voltairiana. So a bit of context, the Dictionnaire philosophique was first published anonymously in July 1764 in Geneva with a fictitious imprint, Londres. Indeed, most of the 18th century editions in French have false addresses, mostly Londres, where their place of publication might have been Switzerland, Holland, Germany, or France. The initial publishers, including the English translation of the 1765 edition, used false addresses in order to print the Dictionnaire without incident. Maybe we haven't mentioned this today, but some of the articles include subjects on atheism, destiny, God, hell, miracles, soul, superstition, tyranny. This work would surely bring trouble to those responsible for the creation, production, and distribution of it. Despite this risk, within the space of 1 year and a half, 7 editions of the Dictionnaire philosophique in French are recorded. The Dictionnaire philosophique has an astoundingly complicated life cycle and subsequent publishing history. From the original edition published in 1764, Voltaire continued to amend and expand the number of articles over a period of 4 years, generating more than a dozen editions, including a slew of counterfeits. What started out initially as 73 articles in one volume was augmented to 80, then 96, to reach 114 articles by 1767 in 2 volumes. In 1769, Voltaire decided to make further additions to the contents and to append a recent publication, L'ABC, an ensemble which was repackaged under a new title, La raison par alphabet. I literally translate this as reason in alphabetical order. If someone else can give me a better translation, I haven't found one yet. So, viewed by scholars today to be the most complete edition of the Dictionnaire philosophique. La raison par alphabet generated another 6 editions from 1769 to 1782. Almost simultaneously, a further metamorphosis took place under Voltaire's direction when he introduced a major part of the Dictionnaire philosophique, 50 articles, into a much grander alphabetical project, that's a quote, comprised of 440 articles in 9 volumes entitled Questions sur l'encyclopédie. This latter work was published between 1770 and 1772 and eventually replaced, at least in the minds of the production agents, the original Dictionnaire philosophique. 5 editions appeared between 1770 and 1782 of the Questions sur l'encyclopédie. A notable edition among them was the Nouvelle Édition by the STN, the Société Typographique de Neuchâtel. Here we are happy to make a connection to our keynote speaker, Robert Darnton, who has integrated this particular title in his landmark essay, What is the History of Books, 1982, and revisited in 2007, and in his article, The Science of Piracy, 2003, revealing the unforgettable hardships in distributing forbidden works in France. The portatif or pocket dictionary lends itself to a discussion on its clearly advertised format. At the outset, portability was a specific strategy employed by Voltaire to achieve wide dissemination of his text. In reference to the encyclopédie, a mammoth and lavish in-folio set published in 28 volumes with supplements, Voltaire sensed the demise of that project in terms of its impact on a wide public. In a piece of correspondence written in April 1756 to d'Alembert, Voltaire affirms, Jamais 20 volumes en folio ne feront de révolution. Ce sont les petits livres portatifs à 30 sous qui sont à craindre. The Dictionnaire philosophique portatif could be produced at low cost to the publisher because less type, paper, and resources for printing were needed, which in turn meant that it could be sold cheaply, paper being the major expense in this equation. Cheaper editions increased accessibility and readership. Its portability also meant that it was easier to transport, that is, to conceal in the packaging of the goods that smugglers and peddlers were bringing to French retailers or selling in the countryside. Voltaire was also following a trend in the marketplace for small specialized dictionaries, which proliferated in the second half of the 18th century. Portability suited the aim of Voltaire, which was to spread enlightenment. Within a year, the book was widely banned and was associated with the gruesome La Barre affair, which we've already mentioned a few times today, involving a young man charged with blasphemy. Dr. Ethel Groffier discusses this case in a chapter of her book, Crier, Voltaire et la justice pénale, published in 2011. La Barre was burned at the stake in 1766, along with the Dictionnaire philosophique. Nothing could be better publicity for a book than being publicly burnt. The Dictionnaire philosophique portatif had immediate widespread reaction, which was captured in book-length refutations, articles in the periodical press, entries in the legal annals, exchanges in personal correspondence, and commented upon by fellow contemporaries. D'Alembert savored each article of the first edition and was charmed by the additions in the 1765 edition, while Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed it to be agréable à lire, but still condemnable. Il jette de l'air de ridicule et de mépris sur des sentiments respectés des hommes. End of quote by Jean-Jacques. It provoked numerous refutations by the anti-philosophes. We've named one today, Nonat. The refutations collectively harness in print the virulent exchanges that begin immediately after the publication of Voltaire's Dictionnaire. And McGill is fortunate also to have a good supply of these refutations. They also include Chaudon and Bergier, for example. The core debate lasted more than 10 years, led by the counter-Enlightenment apologists. Provoked by these attacks over the next decade, Voltaire incessantly revised and augmented his own dictionary. It was an intense publication cycle for Voltaire. This whirlwind of controversy was followed by an avid reading public, as evidenced by the endless editions, including the pirates, in the marketplace of the immediate period of the refutations. Okay, so let's get to a couple of editions at McGill. We'll talk about 2 of 3 counterfeits from the 18th century in the French language McGill owns, 2 of which are on display here. Some of these counterfeits, in fact, set edition precedents by the imaginative handling and marketing of the ever-fluctuating base of material of a work in progress. The circumstance expanded the force of production, this work in progress circumstance, and therefore multiplied the dissemination at an accelerated rate. McGill owns the Avignon counterfeit edition of 1764, based on the first edition of the same year. It is the earliest example at McGill of the Dictionnaire philosophique portatif. So we see it bears a false imprint of Londres, like the first edition did, printed by Grasset, in fact. Researchers have identified the original location for this one, which was due to the study of the paper that was used to produce it, showing a watermark from Montgolfier in Annonay in France. So the paper quality and manufacture, especially through the examination of watermarks, can be a useful detector for a place of publication. For counterfeit editions, additional clues that indicate provenance could be based on regional printing norms and compositional characteristics. Specific types of supply, ornamentation, and woodcuts used to decorate the title page could be other elements, and key material evidence for authenticating editions. So all of these, what you see is not what it is, but the physical evidence of the type supply, for instance, can lead researchers and scholars to uncover and unveil the layers behind a simple title page when it concerns a counterfeit. So the next edition we have at McGill, which is an important case, the Warburg edition is on a higher quality. It's a higher quality edition, An authorized edition, Voltaire made corrections and further additions expressly for this new edition, now comprised of 96 articles. It is extended now into 2 volumes. The Warburg edition, and actually now it contains further articles, Dogma, Genesis, Theologian. The Warburg edition contains the first Préface des éditeurs written by Voltaire and setting a new textual precedent along with the expansion of articles. Besides attempting to convince readers of its improvement, the preface also suggests that the text consists of a compilation from the best minds of Europe, another ploy to further confuse book police. So we see here this is another feigned imprint, 1765. This time with a statement of Amsterdam chez Warburg, but in fact it was printed by the Genevan printer Gabriel Grasset, his 2nd edition of this work. Grasset went through an interrogation over the printing of this edition, but managed to escape the wrath of the authorities. However, Jean-Louis Gondot, fondeur de caractère, was imprisoned and copies in his possession were confiscated. When things went wrong with the police, it was mostly the intermediaries, such as publishers, printers, typographers, distributors, and book dealers connected to the prohibited works, who were subject to sanctions in the form of fines, confiscations, prison, torture, or even their life. These intermediaries tell the story of the publishing history of not only Voltaire's works, but the process of publishing, printing, and distributing forbidden works using ingenious and sometimes dangerous methods, operating through clandestine networks and relying upon publishing agents and fringe peddlers for the sale. The next work we have of the 18th century, lives were spared in the production of the next edition, as far as I know, the first and rather scarce edition called La raison par alphabet. It was published in 1769, still being issued anonymously, we notice, now comprised of 118 articles in 2 volumes. It is another milestone in the publishing history of the Dictionnaire, being the last authorized version prepared with the collaboration of Voltaire. It was also the first edition under this revised title, and the first Kramer edition. Gabriel Kramer tapped into the lucrative market of the Dictionnaire philosophique by presenting an edition of it under the guise of a less controversial title, La raison par alphabet. That being said, it was augmented by 4 articles which are more than controversial, for instance, Inquisition, Lent, torture, along with several expansions to some of the articles. It includes a curious non-alphabetical appendage, L'ABC de cet dialogue, translated from the English by Monsieur Huet, so another one of these extravagant pseudonyms used by Voltaire. Scholars can't fully explain the reason for including this text. However, Mervaux advances the idea that it might have been a strategy by Voltaire and Kramer to evoke interest in l'ABC, which would eventually translate into profits. More has yet to be known about this. So, just to let you know, the Dictionnaire philosophique does enter into Voltaire's collected works, but from the side. We hold 2 fine examples of the Kramer productions at McGill. The last set produced with the participation of Voltaire in his lifetime is a set known as the Encadré edition, so called because each page is framed within a decorative printed border. And I won't go into details, but we do have the authentic, original, complete 40-volume octavo set. There is a counterfeit made in Lyon of this very same work. The point here is that with the consent of Voltaire, volumes 38 to 40 were prepared by the Parisian entrepreneur publisher Panckoucke, who slipped about 85 articles of the Dictionnaire in various stages of their formation into volume 38, under the section with the title Fragments sur divers sujets par ordre alphabétique, what you see on the screen. This was clearly a tactic to dissimulate the more dangerous texts in their first versions, or not published at all in the Questions sur l'encyclopédie. Dangerous means articles such as papism, persecution, sensation, theologian, torture. So this dislocation of the Dictionnaire philosophique will occur in the famous quarto edition by Kramer as well. also owned by McGill, and both cases will affect the textual transmission of the Dictionnaire and set the stage for the editorial interventions that follow in the posthumous collected works. We've mentioned the Kehl edition already today with our last speaker. It's a very profound editorial revision of the Dictionnaire philosophique. And it occurs within the Œuvre complète de Voltaire, printed from 1785 to 1789. It is hailed as one of the epics of printing and publishing, augmented to an astonishing 70 volumes at this point. It was financed and produced under the direction of Beaumarchais, and the Kehl edition involved many important editorial collaborators, one of whom, Condorcet, who had prepared an influential biography entitled La Vie de Voltaire, which completed the set in 1789. This is an important aspect to the Kehl with regards to the Dictionnaire because it will be paired, the Condorcet Vie de Voltaire, sometimes the Memoirs of Voltaire, will be paired with the Philosophical Dictionary in English editions. With regards to the treatment of the Dictionnaire philosophique, this Kehl edition decided to stretch into 7 volumes, all of Voltaire's alphabetical works, under a uniform title, Dictionnaire philosophique, integrating the following separate publications, believe it or not: the Dictionnaire philosophique in its last version of La raison par alphabet, integrating Questions sur l'encyclopédie, another work, L'opinion en alphabet, more than 40 articles written for the Encyclopédie, and a few articles designed for the Dictionnaire of the French Academy. However well-intentioned the editors were, this sequence altered the meaning of the Dictionnaire philosophique. This definitive edition will hold considerable influence over the next generation of editions, including the English translations. So bibliographers state that there are possibly up to 8 editions in the English language, which circulated in London, Glasgow, Dublin, and later New York, of the English language translations. McGill has many good copies of these prized possessions. They also set the stage for a range of innovations into the 19th century. So the Brown edition, published in 1765 on the screen, was the first English language translation published with the title Philosophical Dictionary for the Pocket. It was in fact prepared by a certain S. Bladen, a bookseller publisher who was obliged to hide his identity due to the scandalous nature of the contents. We are also able to establish that the text is based on a 1764 edition pre-Warburg, a state of the text that will endure more than 50 years in the English translations. So it's a very early text that actually gets translated through to English. This edition was offered to the public with some trepidation, as evidenced by the advertisement, which begins, "The great noise which the following work has made in foreign parts on account of the author's freedom in regard to matters of religion may probably occasion some people to be offended with the publication of it in English." So the publisher-translator claims to act as a censor regarding certain passages, so as not to, I quote from the advertisement, "unhinge the minds of the illiterate and the vulgar in their assent to true religion." That is, he continues, to refute at large some articles which may be suspected to have dangerous tendency. And we see on the title page itself a subtitle relating to it being a refutation. So not only is this the first translation and the only one in Europe in 1765, it is at the same time an early refutation of the Dictionnaire philosophique, containing some 56 notes on 34 articles related to religious and other contentious issues. Heavy annotations occur in articles such as Angels, Sensation, Solomon's Soul, Superstition, and here we show the examples from Soul and Superstition. The annotations are comprise the larger part of the page, and they continue over several pages. The one on the Soul is actually divided into a 5-point argument. This annotated translation and the advertisement to the reader will be the standard text in English for a number of years, as I've mentioned. So the first Brown translation of the Philosophical Dictionary for the pocket was still being copied 30 years later for English audience, British audiences, starting around 1792. McGill owns 3 copies of the Carnan edition, so we were able to work on this a little bit more. This edition is the first evidence we have of a quasi-American imprint, printed in London and shipped to the States for sale by Barry, Rogers, and Barry. Evidence is supplied in this case by the existence of press figures appearing in the lower margins of the page within the text, unique to London press shops, and I can't go into too much detail there. And secondly, we found evidence left by the signatures of the previous owners of our copies. One was a G. Ainsley on one of the paste downs, presumably a prominent family in New York, if we follow that lineage correctly, and a signature where certainly the word Philadelphia accompanies a signature, Matthews, indicating that this was the first instance of purchase, which was on American soil. We notice that we start to see the inclusion of frontispiece portraits of Voltaire, but we're establishing an explicit association of the author to this work, but no name as of yet. Frontispieces are something a little more difficult to analyze. We'll just say that this title page is entirely engraved. We see the plate mark evidence of this when up close with the physical copy. We think that the whole plate was accomplished by the same who engraved the portrait. This title will be copied for the first true American edition. So here we arrive to an American imprint. In fact, in the National Index of American Imprints through to 1800, 3 Voltaire titles are listed, including the Philosophical Dictionary, not including the Carnan edition above, supporting our theory that this is really the first true edition here, the Catskill, New York edition, published in 1796. It's visibly copied from the Carnan edition, maybe even just a year apart. More work has to be done about this. We notice the same typographical presentation of the title page and the presence of the medallion portrait vignette of Voltaire, which was probably traced and here printed in reverse. It is signed by a local engraver, Peter Rushton Maverick, Liberty Street, New York, establishing American production credibility along with the imprint statement, which when followed up, these actual production agents did exist. We also notice in this case that the name of Voltaire is penned in ink to reveal the name of the author. So the American edition contains significant textual modifications. First of all, the editors opted for a reduced version of the advertisement as issued in the Brown translation. With a preference, it would seem to highlight the positive aspects of Voltaire's Dictionnaire. They retain a reference regarding his article of toleration, an excellent doctrine, they say, showing that Voltaire was endowed with good nature and humanity, copied from Brown. More importantly, the editors choose only a selection of the Brown refutations, dropping those related to the sacred text of the Bible. They pick up an appendix of 3 articles that was not part of the Brown edition of London. So these articles move this edition status along up to a 1765 precedent, textual precedent, that is. So post-American Revolution, a new spirit of independence might have motivated the production agents of this edition. In any case, the Catskill begins to circulate a revised point of view of Voltaire's Dictionnaire to American audiences. At the other end, there are a couple of editions in between, but we don't have time to explore those. We'll go right to the other end of the spectrum of the Philosophical Dictionary would be this Hunt edition of 1824, augmented from a portable edition of 1 or 2 volumes to a set of 6 volumes. This British edition was a translation by John G. Gorton, based on a recent French version of the Dictionnaire philosophique in Touquet's 8-volume edition, part of a collected work set, Paris 1821, itself based on the Kehl edition. Gorton managed to reduce some extraneous material from Touquet to fit into a small 6-volume set for publishers J. and H.L. Hunt. It therefore departs from the Brown text and those lingering refutations. Clearly, the production agents were working here with the notions of novelty, completeness, and authoritativeness. It is also a turning point in English translations containing an influential original contribution by the translator-editor J.G. Gorton, who gives an original lengthy historical homage to Voltaire. Gorton extols the exuberance of the author's wit, and he also mentions his persevering humanity with which he assailed the deadly superstitions of his country and threw himself between the whole tribe of rancorous and persecuting bigots who howl and hunt down their victims like wolves. So this is a defense of Voltaire, but at the same time, it does include some flagrant British bias on the French, such as he, Voltaire, is not to be judged from some abstract idea of perfection, but is a great man who, although born in the most desolate and corrupt capital city in the world, and early introduced to its most seductive circles, dedicated himself to the Herculean and dangerous labor of attacking and disarming noxious superstition, which for centuries has stood in the way of all human improvement. I highly recommend the Gorton homage. It's really very emphatic. It does really set Voltaire up, though, for to rectify his memory. So we see that this is illustrated with a frontispiece copying the medallion portrait of Voltaire after the Houdon bust that was engraved in the Renoir edition set. And we also notice just that this quotation on the title page will be reproduced in several other editions, which bring along with it either a Condorcet or some sort of memoir of Voltaire along with it into the editions. So we see a Dougdale edition, 1843. It has an 8-page long memoir of Voltaire, which incorporates a small portion of the Gorton preface and acknowledges the Condorcet bibliography. So it's arranged in 2 thick volumes in this case. It's trying to cram in everything into a much smaller space, and it actually is very explicit about its qualité-prix argument. They still say it's still remarkably clear. The publisher is able to supply at 10 shillings instead of 50 in a neat and elegant but cheaper complete edition. So the biographies and the frontispieces are new supplements devised by the production agents to indeed intended to attract interest from the reading public. They will be effective for sales and consequently build Voltaire's legend. So the last example, American, is the Kneeland edition, an American edition bringing us in close proximity to the philosophical dictionary on this continent. So I'm referring to the Boston Stereotype edition starting in 1836, and they were reprinted through to 1870. This edition adapts precedents and introduces a few important departures in text. So Kneeland, there's a whole story about Abner Kneeland, and I'll let you explore him through the book Livre Dangereux. This was edited by Patrick Lee and Andrew Brown. He was charged with blasphemy, to make it short, and put in jail, so some copies do not have his name on the title page. He picks up the Gorton translation of the Kehl version of the Dictionnaire philosophique, but certainly this is a unique and interesting American adaptation. There's a second preface to the American edition. Expands it with a particular bias regarding the notion of the real cause of truth, i.e. unmitigated by the clergy and geared in a local cause. There are substantial editorial notes, both critical and argumentative, a dozen more articles from a manuscript copy, plus an article of his own composition amounting to 517 articles. There are also blank pages at the end entitled Family Record into Volume 2 to be used for the recording of family history as practiced with the family Bible. Kneeland fully intended the philosophical dictionary to become like the Bible, in his words, a family book. So these contents help to explain the iconography here. We're looking at the second frontispiece Voltaire at home with the family at Ferney, where Voltaire is seen sitting, giving instructions to his family circle, books cluttering the floor space, and it looks like an animated discussion from all sides. Kneeland did take the trouble to say that the frontispieces were added at a considerable expense, but used to greatly embellish these volumes, a work overall which will do honor to the American press. He also says that it has been a heavy and expensive undertaking for the infant state of free enquiry in this country, but we hope that it will meet the approbation of the liberal part of the, comparatively speaking, already enlightened public. So these two hefty quarto-size editions are all now quite impossible to fit into a pocket. So just to conclude, we noticed that the work in progress significantly impacted the production cycles of the editions of the Dictionnaire philosophique and its English language avatars. The original versions from the 18th century created textual precedents for the English version pocket editions, while the editorial interventions in the collected works maintained the text, and then it was recaptured by the posthumous editions, the definitive versions of the DP, which then were printed into multi-volume sets. The role of the production agents in dealing with the work in progress, arranging the text in relation to their copies at hand and to their print shop resources, were motivated by commercial gain, thus the introduction of original frontispieces, new biographies, and justification of the text, being newness, completeness, and authenticity, but also by editorial principle. We see the non-profit Kehl enterprise, the Brown refutations, the Hunt edition with the Gorton apology of Voltaire, and the Kneeland innovations for an American cause. Thank you.